Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics and our special Oscars So White minisode focusing on old classics for February. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe. Hashtag Oscars So White.
That's right. Now, every month now, we're going to do a minisode featuring 4 old classic films instead of doing them on our weekly show. And for the first month, we thought it would be fitting. Not only is it Black History Month, but of course, the Oscars have been crazy with the Oscar So White hashtag saying how they're not a fan of the black people or any other race other than white old people. So we decided, you know what, no, we're going to celebrate African Americans, and we all picked a movie that garnered a Best Actor or Actress trophy for an African American. And I'm up first with Ghost. This, of course, won for Whoopi Goldberg in 1990 for Supporting Actress. This is a romantic fantasy thriller starring Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, Goldberg, and President Tony Goldwyn. In it, banker Sam Wheat, Swayze, gets murdered by his business partner, played by Tony Goldwyn, and Sam's ghost must get a reluctant psychic, played by Goldberg, to convince his wife, Demi Moore, that his murder wasn't an accident and that she is in jeopardy as well. And this is one of my all-time favorite movies, for a long time in my top 25, probably more like a top 50 at this point, but I think the best thing about this movie is that it tries so many different things and kind of nails them all. It works as a romance, it works as a comedy, it's chilling at times with the thriller aspect. It's definitely popcorny and blockbustery in its treatment, especially with the people in the cast. I mean, these guys were huge box office draws at the time. Demi Moore may be sort of on the beginning end of that. Patrick Swayze certainly, was a star by then, and Whoopi Goldberg was a comedy star, certainly.
And on Star Trek.
And was she by 1990? I guess she probably was, right? Yeah, actress on Star Trek Next Generation. She had done, obviously, a ton of films, but none really with a lot of dramatic weight. It was mostly like Jumpin' Jack Flash and Burglar and that kind of thing, which are fun movies as well. They're popcorny too, and she's certainly the comic relief in this film, but it works. She certainly deserved the Oscar. I don't know how many of the other movies I saw that were up for Best Supporting Actress in 1990, but I thought Goldberg really does steal the show. I mean, every scene she's in is great. And Patrick Swayze, I would say, I hate to say even over Dirty Dancing, but I think this is probably his best performance. I give Ghost an A. Justin?
Not an A+, though. Too popcorny?
It was an A+ for a long time, but I think it's sort of like some of those movies in that regard, like from when you and I were younger, Joe, that it's like, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Sure, I probably gave that an A+ when it came out if I was grading, but realistically,
gotcha.
It doesn't hit everything. I think this is, the pottery scene is classic, but it might be a little corny.
It's a little corny.
A little, he says.
I know, Justin hates it, but I think a little is okay.
Where they switch hands? What
yeah.
Was it? Like the camera angles really, her hand, what was it? One shot was like really off.
Yes. Yes. Okay. The pottery scene, I pointed this out to you guys when we watched it. Completely dry hands for the rest of the scene, for the rest of the song.
Cleans fast.
Yeah.
Clay.
Hey, ghost hands.
That's right.
I avoided this movie for a long time because I knew of its reputation. It was a date movie, but it's a date movie with a lot more to offer. And I think that speaks a lot to your point, Dan, of like, oh, yeah, it's a romance, but it's also this really interesting fantasy film and also a thriller. And a lot of it works, not all of it does. I think Whoopi Goldberg's performance is definitely warranted. I'm surprised that a more comedic performance actually did win the Oscar, just knowing the Academy's...
supporting categories usually when
they're allowed to be a bit more playful.
Alan Arkin.
But one of the things I really did love about this movie is its politic makes sense, and it commits to it. The scenes where Swayze is struggling to come to terms with his newfound status is brought up later in other scenes where he's finally starting to come to terms with it. My one criticism is I think the closer we get to the end, the more over the top and ridiculous it starts to get, and it starts taking stranger and darker turns, which don't completely throw it off base, but it's a bit of a different story. So for just those like minor moments, I leave this one with an A-.
All right, Joe?
This is one that I had seen a long time ago, and I remembered enjoying, but I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it on a second viewing. I think that one thing that's interesting about this movie is, you guys are right, it does cover a lot of ground. It is kind of a multiple different movies at once. I think people think of it as a romance movie, but I think that's actually the least of the movie. I think it really is.
It really is.
It's really more of
Because he dies pretty early on.
this really interesting
The romance is kind of gone at that point.
Yeah, just this interesting supernatural revenge tale, and I like the mythology of it. And I think that a movie handling the idea of dealing with being a ghost, I think this one has really one of the best developed of any of them, which I really like. It's called Ghost, and it really is about being a ghost. But with the thriller aspect, it's good, and the romance is strong. The only real negative of the movie is that I think Demi Moore's character just isn't that fleshed out, which just kind of bothered me. Like, she seems nice, but you're trying to get back to her because you love her, and I'm like, I don't know if I quite bought that as well as I could have. I mean, pottery scene aside. But all on the whole, though, I think it is still a very strong movie, and I really do enjoy it. It's very, very solid in all regards. My grade is A.
Ooh, all right. Wonderful. Yeah, I agree. I mean, Demi Moore's character maybe isn't as fleshed out as she could be, but
that's the only part I was like,
I don't know. I mean, her whole character is basically like,
Ditto.
They were in love. She's hot, so Tony Goldwyn wants to get with her.
I know,
Ditto.
but that's
it.
But if that's all our main drive for our characters to get back to her because she's nice and hot, I'm like, give her a little more.
I don't know that we need that much more, though, because really, like you said, it is about a ghost. He clearly loves her.
Yeah.
And it's definitely his story, not hers.
And it's his story, not hers. And it's, the interaction with him and Whoopi is good.
But if it's going to be marketed as a romance movie, I think the romance should be stronger. And I think
that's the point of the pottery scene, Joe.
I suppose that's true. They like the Righteous Brothers, and they like to make pottery together and then clean up very quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean,
I think there could have been a little more.
There maybe could have been. I think if there's anything that actually needs a little bit more, it's
Whoopi?
The motive. No, Whoopi's fine as she is. I mean, I guess I could have used a couple more Whoopi scenes, but I mean, she signs the wrong name. Many funny things. But no, I would say the Swayze Goldwyn. Like,
Hatred?
what is
Exchange.
their, or maybe the three of them, him, Goldwyn, and Demi Moore. What is their dynamic? Because obviously they're friends. Ish. But, yeah, but I mean, she and him are still good friends after Patrick Swayze dies.
Maybe.
I
mean, I think Demi Moore needs more fleshed out, but I think establishing their friendship and what it meant, I think, would have had more impact later on, because we find out about his betrayal, and then we're like, okay, but he still seems like he's kind of a good guy, and he didn't really want this to happen the way it did, and then towards the end, I'm evil, and I'm like, you turned the dime.
Does this actually make sense?
That may be one negative.
That was like, it's like, I'm like, it was like, okay, you were like kind of believable, and then
this happened.
You were evil the whole time? Really? I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And then he goes to hell.
He gets a little more desperate.
Does he deserve to go? I mean, that's black and white view of afterlife, but I don't know.
Well, he wasn't a great person.
Not great, but I mean, I think even
scale from 1 to 10, like a 6.
Even Swayze knows, like, oh man, like I don't know if this is the right thing. Not too late. They're coming. You like the demon shadow guys?
Demons freaked me out when I was a kid.
They're pretty cool.
They really. I thought they were well done.
I like it's funny actually with Ghostbusters. I think it's kind of on that same line of early.
It sort of is
cool camera work and some early CGI. I like that. It's fake, but has a strangeness to it that is actually kind of impressive.
Yeah. Well, up next we're going to talk about Justin's pick, and that was Denzel Washington winning for Glory.
Matthew Broderick plays Colonel Robert Gould Shaw, an officer in the Federal Army, who volunteered to lead the first company of black soldiers. Struggling with prejudice and never expected to fight, Glory chronicles the journey Shaw and his men took to come together as a unit and fight in the Civil War. Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine's soon...
That's right. I forgot Andre
and
Braugher,
of course,
right.
Andre Braugher from Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Oh, yeah.
Also stars. Now, this was a movie that was written from the historical accounts that they've been able to conjure up from these events. So how much of this is true is very subjective, but having talked to many historians over the course of my college career, the general rule that I've always heard is all the greats, Braveheart and other ones of that ilk, horribly inaccurate. Even some of my favorites, Inglourious Bastards, Kelly's heroes. Historical inaccuracies abound. I'm not going to deny that Glory has a couple moments where it probably flirts a little too much with Hollywoodization, but the one thing I have to give it a lot of credit for is how well director Edward Zwick really works the scenery, really works his characters, and gives us this really fleshed out journey seen from a variety of different angles. From being a leader, from being a soldier, from being someone who was never ever expected to fight and being in this world, and other people seeing the hypocrisy of this whole aspect. In the case of Denzel Washington, who absolutely warrants his role, managing to convey huge amounts of emotion with nothing more than a stare in one particular instance. It does get a little bit heavy-handed at times, and the ending is unbelievably dark, though it happens, so take that for what it's worth.
And dumb, historically.
It's not
stupid. It's dumb that they did it.
I mean,
it's not. It was the only choice that they had.
I know they're under orders, but
they were under orders. It's not their fault that they had to fight at that time.
They were under orders, but
somebody made the order and they're dumb.
The movie,
yes, but it's not Matthew Broderick's fault that happened.
But it was Matthew Broderick's fault.
It still led them into like the. To be honest, that last scene is kind of funny.
It's unfortunate.
Because they get past that hill and it's just like,
it's a slaughter. But I mean, I've always thought that Glory is one of the movies that's always really hyped, and I think is completely warranted. I've seen it several times. I think it still holds up. I think this one with an A.
Joe?
I think that the movie does seem to have this good way of certainly capturing the time. I once again, I'm a big sucker for the costuming, and I think for the reenactment, I think as a war movie, it is very good, and it is telling an interesting aspect of the racial struggle, basically, because you have these slaves, or former slaves, or just black men, trying to fight in this military that doesn't want to accept them, and their struggle just to fight for their own freedom, of their own people and their own country, even though they have to face it on the front of the, technically the good guys in this particular conflict. And that is really interesting. I kind of wish that the individuals we do get to see, like Morgan Freeman, like Denzel, like Brooklyn Nine-Nine, what's his name?
Andre Braugher.
Like Andre Braugher. I wish we kind of got to have their characters a little more fleshed out than they actually were. The acting is great, but I don't really feel like we get to know these guys as well as we could, even though it does portray the struggle. Really, the story is about Matthew Broderick's character, and this is easily one of my favorite performances of his, one of the rare dramatic ones, but he does such a good job and such a well-written character. I think he's just somebody you can really get behind. You can see the struggle more from his perspective, which is good, but once again, given the subject matter, I think that we should have seen it a little bit more from the soldier's perspective, to be a little bit fair. Overall, though, I think it's a well-made movie, and I'll leave it with an A-.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because I feel the same way. Broderick is the best character in the film because he's the one we actually get to know, and I don't think he gets enough credit for this performance. I think he's great in this movie. The other gentlemen they're obviously Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Andre Braugher. They don't give bad performances.
They don't.
Typically. Why don't we know more about them? I really would have liked to...
We know enough. We know that one Brower is nervous
well,
gentleman
they
guy.
don't really come into the picture until like the second act.
Morgan Freeman is wild.
I don't think that's true.
I think it's earlier than...
Fairly true.
They show up pretty early.
I mean, the first 20-30 minutes is Matthew Broderick's current status. Act 2 is more or less coming to basic training, coming into the 54th Company. And then Act 3 is, will we ever actually get to fight?
Well, we certainly get to see them interact and do things, but we never really get to know them too much as individuals.
Yeah.
We're carried by the strength of the performances, which are very good.
Which are good. I can't deny that. But, Joe, you're absolutely right. For a movie like this that is supposed to be based around these characters, it's sort of like if 12 Years a Slave was about Brad Pitt. No, we need to sort of focus on the African American aspect of this. Now, that being said, I do think it's a great movie. It's very moving. Certainly, a lot of anger I have for both the outcome and for
they got there.
How they got there in the first place and how they were treated. Obviously, it does evoke all of those emotions properly. I think Zwick is just a great director. certain other movies we talked about. He did the original About Last Night. So here he proves, obviously he can do both comedy and very hard-hitting drama.
Absolutely.
So I do like the movie. I also give it an A- like Joe, but I really do wish it were a little bit more focused on them and less on Broderick, who,
but I mean,
because of that, is the best character.
It's very much his story, and it's obviously taken from his accounts. So how much that statement is actually fair, I don't know.
I guess that's true, but as you said in your review, or
even
in your synopsis, they're already taking liberties, so that's fine that they're from his accounts, but if they're taking liberties, then give this guy something to do and give that guy something to do,
like
too.
You can have
and
narrations.
I think they do. I mean, obviously we don't get to know them very thoroughly until Act 2, but I think for the most part we get enough. Obviously this was we know you for the time being because we're in the situation together, not a like, hey, we're both soldiers, let's be buddies because this is our thing.
No, but I mean, there was certainly a camaraderie in the fact that they were in this struggle together.
Yeah.
Both being in the battle and being black. Sort of, doubling their...
Well, you're right, Justin. You said it perfectly. There's enough. But
more might have been nice.
Yeah.
What I like about this movie, and the main reason I wanted to run it, is it's not your standard Civil War story. It's not about the battle sequences. Even Edward Zwick, when he talks about it, basically says, I wanted a big battle sequence at the beginning, I wanted a big battle sequence at the end. The rest of it is much more about the characters and their interplay, so you have an attachment to these characters.
And I'd say that we have an attachment to Broderick.
I would say I have an attachment to Broderick and an attachment to the African American situation, but
the group.
as a whole. But I can't say I was attached to any of the specific characters, including Denzel.
I mean, they all have their different perspectives. They all have something to prove, but
they all do. But I mean, they're trying to give this binary between those two actions. So obviously, from a low-ranking soldier versus a high-ranked individual who's tasked with doing this and wants to do right, and because of that, there's a matter of trying to keep up with appearances, which leads to a great scene very early on in the movie. And speaks a whole lot to Broderick's character and his overall growth over the course of the story, as well as watching these men who have absolutely no idea how to become a soldier try to rise up to the challenge, which I think does give us a lot about them. Eventually not focusing on them entirely as individuals, but as a complete unit, which I think is where we end up at the conclusion of the story.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it is certainly the best film about the Civil War I've probably ever seen.
Gettysburg?
Gettysburg is, like, so bloated. I get it. It's 5 hours,
All right.
I remember watching that in theaters, and the intermission, said it all, but...
Well, sometimes you have to take a pee break.
I did, because it was, 2 hours before we even got to the intermission. No, Gettysburg is way overrated.
Dang.
No, this is far better than that. But I still would have liked to see more with the characters. All right, Joey, your film was Last King of Scotland, and that was an Academy Award for Forrest Whitaker.
For playing Eddie Amin.
So let's hear about it.
The Last King of Scotland tells the fictionalized story of the character Nicholas Garrigan, plays by Professor X. That's James McAvoy, and I think probably the first performance I ever saw him in, as a young Scottish doctor who travels to Uganda as opposed to Canada, and becomes the personal physician for President Idi Amin, who was played by Forrest Whitaker. Now, the film is based around events of Amin's rule, and the title comes from this idea that he often tried to give himself titles, because he was kind of an eccentric, over-the-top guy.
And boy, did he love Scotland.
In this movie, man, he has like a Scotland band, he dresses Scotland, tries to do the accent. He all but becomes the King of Scotland, and I think it's a pretty awesome sounding title, and it fits. Now, the reason I want to suggest this one is because I feel like on the history of our show, we haven't really seen too many great Forrest Whitaker ones come up. So I'm like, well...
Not really.
We have to remember this guy has done some great things, and this is really one of his best performances, I think. Idi Amin is an individual that I find very fascinating because he was this horrible person, but he did put on a very entertaining face to the world, and he had a strange likability to him, which I think that... a lot of dictators historically seem to do. They're very charismatic, which is how they can rally a lot of people behind them for their cause. And it could be argued that despite his war crimes, he did sort of do some things for his country. These situations are often complex, and I think that we get to see a bit of that through his portrayal of the charismatic stuff, the likability, but also the frightening horror and insanity of Idi Amin. And I think that Forrest Whitaker just brings him to life. And from what I know about him historically and some of the other performances I've seen him and done in other films, this one's just spot on scary. And even looks a little like him too, so it worked. But that's really the best thing about the movie. Everything else is just kind of okay, because really the character that is sort of a metaphor for what's going on obviously didn't really exist. So he does have an interesting story. We get to see the outsider's perspective of Uganda, but a lot of it's kind of sporadic in what we tell, and then it gets a little overly long, kind of dealing with the tension, and you're like, okay, what's going to happen here? And the thing that kind of angered me the most is, historically speaking, the most interesting aspect of Idi Amin is how he dealt with the whole crisis in the airport with terrorists. That's literally what brought him to international attention, and that comes in like towards the end of the movie as like a side note. And I'm thinking, if there's anything you want to get a huge chunk of runtime, how not cut down some of this guy's fake story, and how about that story and how he dealt with that? And there was a film where he actually does, I forget what it's called, but he actually has a bigger part in that. If you want to see it, that was my first introduction to this story. So yeah, for his performance, it's amazing, and there is definitely a great atmosphere, and there are some interesting things that are tackled, but a lot of the other aspects of the movie are very uneven. I'd leave it with a B+.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the film definitely sort of gets twisted halfway through as we see his sort of craziness and dictatorship come out. He starts out kind of as this, oh, hey, I'm a jovial guy and I'm cool. And then, like,
Scotland.
by the end, it's like almost a horror movie. Like,
You
it just,
have greatly dissembled your father.
really, really, like,
Whoa.
it gets nuts. And you're right, Whitaker plays it phenomenally. I mean,
great.
it's best performance I've ever seen him give. I get why he won the Oscar for it. It makes sense.
Night and day, he can just weave whatever he is.
It really is. But
That movie.
Well, I don't understand why they had to create a fiction around this man.
Yeah, it's
just
beautiful.
do his story. Like, I don't understand why the McAvoy character even existed. And I understand, Joe, like you mentioned, it was sort of
Metaphorical.
an amalgamation of different people and a metaphor for what was going on.
Looking in, yeah.
But, like,
It wasn't really necessary.
it wasn't
It really
necessary.
isn't.
I didn't get why that happened. And Scandal was fine as his wife.
Kerry Washington.
And Gillian Anderson was there.
She was good.
I
Yeah.
thought she was somebody else. Who did I think she was?
You thought she was Virginia Madsen.
Oh yeah, I thought she was Madsen in this.
But they look the same.
They're the same person. I'm convinced.
Two beautiful women. That's right.
They are. But like, her whole thing didn't really need to be. It was just sort of disappointing because the guy is already such a
Character.
a character and a legend, quote unquote.
Not the legend.
Not the legend, but a legend.
It's not really as about him as it could be.
So I'm a little below you, Joe. It's a B for me.
Okay.
It's one of those cases of where it's like an A+ performance and
Okay,
like
movie.
a B- C+ movie, so it kind of balances
So
out.
it's a Seinfeld. It's a B movie,
Well,
which I watched recently.
God, I'm gonna watch B movie.
It's a good movie.
All right, Justin.
I mean, it's movies like this that just make me wonder, why on earth is Whitaker so unbelievably 50-50 with his filmography? Obviously, we have performances like this that are just mind-blowing and transformative.
And the bagels.
And then we have hashtag needs more bagels.
Bagels.
You see, the whole clincher of this case. What is it? It's about bagels.
That really made me angry.
There you go.
God, taking three was terrible. It was bad.
He just eats the bagels.
That's how he knows.
You tampered evidence. Why are you tampering with evidence? The bagels are so important. Oh.
Whitaker want to make a movie, we have bagels.
You just I haven't seen the comedy. Just munching them. Is this comedy? Oh, so bad. Kind of funny though.
Now, I could argue the whole whitewashing with McAvoy's character and
White
really strange tonal shifts once we start heading into the third act. But honestly, what really does make this so impressive is the performance of Forrest Whitaker. So much so that I don't think anyone in the supporting cast can keep up with him, including James McAvoy.
No.
which
McAvoy's okay in general. I don't
He's
think
playing James McAvoy.
He's not like an A+ actor in general.
He's decent.
he's not. But I've seen
He's
him.
fine.
I've seen him like actually when he's actually trying. He's okay. He can.
When he's actually trying, he's okay is not a
All right,
great.
let me rephrase.
Okay.
He's good. He's not necessarily Oscar worthy, but he's good. But no, I mean the story itself, I'm not sure how I feel about the thriller format. Like, I get like, okay, we want to sort of lean you into this world where everything seems like it's okay at first, and then the more you sort of go deeper into it, the more twisted you realize
Kinda
everything actually
lull
is.
you into a false sense of security.
But the problem with that is it becomes less of this sort of like downward spiral and more into
Plummet?
complete political thriller for basically no reason than because we can. And because of that, it's dark, and there's definitely aspects of it that I totally believe, particularly with the fact that Amin was completely and utterly insane. But there are other aspects that are just, it feels like it got Hollywoodized, and it really does take you out of it, despite Whitaker's great performance. So much like you, Joe, I leave this one with a B+ as well.
Anderson bounced, by the way.
Well, she knew to. She
did.
But you're right. She's
She got
kind
out
of
of Dodge.
superfluous character. Like, you're here. There's kind of a issue.
He
and
could
then,
have just been by himself. Like, I didn't understand what. They're already made up people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But we had to give him a sort of, but not really love interest.
Well, look, she wanted to do something because...
His love interest was Scandal.
No, she was love interest for like a second.
I was
For
going to
a
say,
minute.
it goes white love interest, then black love interest, then political thriller.
I guess.
And then you had like Emin sprinkled throughout.
Yes. See, it's really the world's worst bromance.
Their relationship is definitely the most interesting.
Well, it is.
And it does get strangely intimate. But I think that's the idea that Emin's character as a person did really like, connect to these other ideas and places and got really passionate about things.
And I appreciated that aspect of the film.
Which is why they called it that.
But they could have done it
without
making people up. I just think it's
insulting.
It's insulting. Yeah, that's a good word. All right, well, our final film is Listener's Choice. We thank Melissa for this, and that is Lilies of the Field.
Otherwise known as Take Me to the Chapel.
Take Me to the Chapel.
Amen, sir.
This
Amen.
is a 1963 film starring Sidney Poitier in the role that made him the first black man to win not only Best Actor, but an Oscar in any category. Hattie McDaniel, of course, won Supporting Actress for Gone with the Wind like 25 years before that, but he was the first man to win an Oscar of African-American descent, so that's pretty cool. He plays Homer Smith, a traveling jack-of-all-trades worker who encounters a group of East German nuns who believe he has been sent to them by God to build a chapel, or a chapel, as the nuns insisted on saying.
And then they know how to say it.
He got mad at the end and corrected them.
Because
it's
know.
Chapel, damn it.
And then they know that, okay, thank you for constructing the chapel. I'm like, finally, it took you 2 hours.
Oh my God.
Ooh. That was annoying.
But listen, Poitier carries this film on his back. He's in every scene of the movie.
What a great way to state it.
And he does. I mean, literally and figuratively.
As he builds the house, bricks. He's keeping the film going.
By the way, they actually built that thing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
They had crews working,
throughout the filming?
Throughout the night when they weren't filming to build more bricks if they needed, more bricks for the next scene.
That's awesome.
So apparently that was a real thing.
Holy cow.
That apparently could have withstood the structure, but then they had to knock it down because it was like a set or whatever. But they said they built like a legitimate thing, so that was cool. But I liked his character a lot. He's tough but sensitive, willing to help out, but far from a pushover.
Sounds like a butt, though.
No butt with his character.
Okay.
The nuns' performances,
they were pretty
performances.
Good,
yeah, they range from decent to a little less than average. I don't think any of them were amazing.
Well, I think the supporting characters, like the townspeople, might be better examples of good performance.
Yeah, the bartender was good.
Yeah.
I liked him a lot. Well, it's sort of what Justin said with Last King of Scotland. I mean, there weren't any terrible performances, but they can't keep up with Poitier.
No.
The guy's amazing. But really, it's for the most part just a feel good film. We rarely see this type of movie anymore. Even in the 60s, it seems like a little bit
safe.
Yeah, maybe safe. I mean, it seems like a film that might be for the 40s and 50s, and I'm not downgrading it for that. I liked that it was such a feel-good film. I liked that his performance was amazing. I liked the song, the Amen song. No, this was a good movie. I give it an A-. Justin?
Well, can't ever forget the great Sidney Poitier. He may have been known for his other roles, obviously, as we mentioned several times over the course of viewing it, Mr. Tibbs.
True.
Call me Mr. Bricks.
Call me Mr. Bricks. Joe made me laugh real hard about that during the filming.
Smokes, too. I think it was Mr. Smokes. A couple of them.
Yeah. Which I'm ashamed to say I've never actually seen, but Lilies revels and thrives on its simplicity. It doesn't try to be more than it is. It doesn't throw random things to make it simpler. It just focuses on a simple story and somehow within that finds these great opportunities for discussion about these prominent social issues. Obviously, Poitier as a black man and dealing with this oppression and discrimination, and with the other people that he's hiring to work with them, and should he even work with charity, and also maybe even to some extent the aspect of, dare I say, immigration, peppered alongside, I thought, really phenomenal cinematography. And needless to say, I was left singing Amen.
I was too, man.
All
that
night.
song is catchy.
But I think it's a great movie. It definitely is very well deserving of being called a classic. A.
Joe, how about for you?
All right. Well.
Amen for Justin.
A very high amen.
Shut up, Joe.
No, I think this movie is a good one. Definitely a good one. A feel-good movie for sure. Held together in its simplicity. I think Poitier is great in it, for sure. It's a very nice movie. I think that it hints at some more interesting subject matter, but it doesn't really dive too far into anything. It's still pretty safe. My biggest problem with the movie is there just isn't that much of a story, which unfortunately is kind of an issue. But it's a nice movie that holds together pretty well, much like the foundation of the home, and I leave it with a B.
Oh, okay. A little low.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, Justin, I do agree with Joe that they sort of dance around certain issues.
I mean, they were still being...
But
This came out in the 50s or...
63.
Okay, so they were at that era where movies could talk about deeper things. Obviously, the Defiant ones, like, tackling bigger issues. Obviously, that one much more explicitly because Tony Curtis was playing a racist.
Yeah, none of these nuns are racist.
Oh.
They're very nice.
No, they're very nice. I think a little delirious at times, but...
They get a little silly.
I think it was more or less a matter of how can we be an entertaining story but also tackle these themes without compromising anything. So, were there ways they could have probably done that more effectively? Yes, but they're still at the end of the day trying to tell the story. So, I think it does its job for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't. I don't think this is really an issue movie.
I'm not saying it is.
No, but you're saying it brings up a lot of
touches on a
issues
few
and
things.
I mean,
tackles
that's not
them.
an accurate statement.
I think it dances around them a little bit, but that's probably about the extent of it.
Well, I think if you're whether or not you're talking about it from the racial issue or the class issue of the time, I think my biggest issue with the film was that there just wasn't that much conflict. I mean, okay, there's some annoyances with building the house, but you just next scene, building the house. Building the house. I mean, there's relationships.
It's not
that
really a
build.
story defined by conflict, though. It's more or less.
All right,
the conflict is like, okay, do I build this house for free, or do I?
I see where you're coming from. Even by you saying that, I'm already getting less interested in the story. Whether or not I should actually get these nuns to, pay me for building the house. I mean,
look at 99 Homes, Joe.
Oh, yeah, they're exactly the same.
I didn't say they're exactly the same, but if we want to talk conflict...
If you want to... Yeah, there was a lot more conflict
Justin,
in 99
that was a lot of conflict in 99 Homes. He had to kick his best friends out of their house.
It's not quite the same.
He was struggling with his own issues of...
I mean, if we're going to talk conflict comes in a lot of different ways. And I don't think it's fair for you to say that just because there isn't direct conflict, that means there is none. I'm sorry. I don't think that's an accurate statement.
Did I say there was no conflict?
I think Joe's
You
saying...
said that there was not enough conflict. I don't think that's an accurate statement. I'm sorry.
I think Joe is saying they're not touching on the conflict.
The conflict is the entire impetus of the story, Joe.
Yeah, I know, and you just said something earlier about how some stories aren't defined by conflict, which is a direct contradiction to all stories ever.
Which is not necessarily true either, but...
Pretty much every interesting story ever made is based around a problem that needs to be solved, right?
Depends on the story. I mean...
No, every story...
Also depends on how you define problem.
Every movie that exists...
I'm trying to think of one.
...has to have a problem that needs to be solved. That's the point of a story. And I'm just saying that in this particular instance, I didn't find the story really that interesting. Because it's about a guy trying to build a house. Which is fine. But if they had touched on some of the really interesting stuff at the time, like, say, 12 Angry Men, much more interesting movie,
Very different movie, I might add.
Very different, but, I think it came up this time before. Pretty controversial. There you go.
That speaks even more to the point.
Yeah, so I'm saying, like, come on, man. Like, if you're gonna at least bring up some of the racial stuff, can we have more than, like, a line or two?
Well, I think it was just fine. There's definitely not enough tension in this movie. Did I like the story? Yes, it was fine. It's a feel-good movie. I don't think it was that much of an issue movie. So, I think maybe I'm sort of between you guys in that regard, as well as my grade. So, all right, well, that is going to do it for the Oscar So White minisode. Next month is DC month in honor of Batman v Superman. So we will have 4 movies from the DC universe for you. And that will do it for this week. You can subscribe on the channel here or check us out on Facebook at Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, or catch up on the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye!